The morning sun rose over New Sejong, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was a beautiful day on the human colony world. The kind of day that made people forget they lived light years away from Earth. Minji Choi stood at the entrance of the school, watching the children board the transport bus. Her daughter Sira bounced with excitement. Her small backpack almost too big for her 6-year-old frame. Today was the field trip to the Valley of Flowers, where the children would study the native plants and learn about the ecosystem. "Mom, I packed my camera," Sira called out, waving enthusiastically. Minji smiled and waved back. As the colony's pediatrician, she knew every child boarding that bus. There was Hyun Kim, the shy 8-year-old who loved drawing. Ji-won Lee, the responsible 12-year-old who always looked after the younger kids. 23 children in total, accompanied by 2 teachers. The bus lifted off smoothly, heading toward the valley 30 kilometers north. Minji watched until it disappeared over the horizon. Then she returned to her clinic, ready for another routine day. High above the planet, Captain Taeyong Park sat in the command center of the orbital defense platform. His shift had been quiet. Trade ships came and went, following their approved flight paths. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. Then his sensor officer called out, "Captain, we have an unscheduled vessel entering atmosphere. Sector 7. Taeyong frowned. "Identification? It's registered as a Vrelix merchant ship. The Times Prophet's Edge. Asterisk. But they didn't file an approach vector. Hail them," Taeyong ordered. "Ask them to state their business." The communication officer tried several times. No response. Taeyong felt a cold sensation in his gut. Sector 7. That was near the Valley of Flowers. Track that ship, and get me a patrol, ready to launch. But it was already too late. The children had spread out across the meadow, their tablets recording the colorful flowers that grew nowhere else in the galaxy. Teacher Bora was explaining how the plants used the planet's unique soil composition when the shadow fell over them. The ship was massive, blocking out the sun. It descended rapidly, its engines creating a windstorm that bent the flowers flat. The children screamed and huddled together. "Run!" Teacher Bora shouted. "Back to the bus!" But before any child could take more than a few steps, a blue light swept across the meadow. Hyun Kim felt his body go numb. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. His eyes stayed open as he fell to the ground, watching helplessly as a beam of light pulled him upward. Sarah tried to scream for her mother, but no sound came out. She floated up into the air, along with all the other children. The last thing she saw was Teacher Bora collapsed on the ground, also frozen by the strange light. Inside the Vrelix ship, Kixron watched with satisfaction as the cargo bay filled with the small humans. 23 specimens, all young and healthy. The buyer would pay a fortune for this collection. Humans were still rare in the exotic trade market, especially their offspring. "Are they secured?" Kixron asked his first mate, Bektor. "Yes, Captain. All specimens are contained and stable. No damage. Excellent. Set course for the rendezvous point. Maximum speed." Bektor hesitated. "Captain, these are humans. They're a council species. This could cause problems." Chixron's multiple eyes gleamed with greed. "The council moves slowly. By the time they file their complaints, we'll be rich and retired on a pleasure moon. Besides, these are just juveniles. The humans probably have thousands more. They breed quite efficiently, I'm told." The ship's engines roared to life. Within minutes, the Times Prophet's Edge Times had broken through the atmosphere and jumped to hyperspace, leaving New Sejong behind. Teacher Bora woke up an hour later. The stun effect had worn off, leaving her disoriented and dizzy. She sat up, looking around the empty meadow. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The sky was clear and blue. The children were gone. All of them. She grabbed her communicator with shaking hands. "This is Teacher Bora. Emergency. Emergency. The children have been taken. All the children. Please, someone help us." Minji was treating a patient when her communicator buzzed. She saw it was the school's emergency line and answered immediately. What she heard made her blood run cold. "What do you mean taken?" she demanded. "Where is Sira? Where is my daughter?" But Teacher Bora could only sob and repeat the same words. "They're gone. A ship came. They're all gone." Minji dropped her medical scanner and ran. She didn't remember getting in her vehicle or driving to the school. All she knew was the desperate need to find her child. When she arrived at the school, dozens of other parents were already there, their faces twisted with fear and confusion. The colony administrator tried to calm everyone down, but his words meant nothing. The parents wanted answers. They wanted their children back. On the orbital platform, Taeyang stared at his screens in growing horror. His team had tracked the Vrelix ship to the exact location of the field trip. They had recorded its rapid ascent, and they had captured the hyperspace signature before the ship jumped away. "How long ago?" Taeyang asked, his voice tight. 43 minutes, sir. They had a head start while we were trying to hail them." Taeyang slammed his fist on the console. 43 minutes. The ship could be anywhere within a dozen light-years by now. But they had the signature. They could track it. "Alert the fleet," he ordered. "I want every available ship ready to launch. And send a priority message to the Galactic Council. Tell them a Vrelix vessel has committed an act of kidnapping against human colonists." His communication officer looked up nervously. "Sir, should I classify this as a military incident?" Taeyang thought about those 23 children. He thought about the parents who would soon learn their worst nightmare had come true. He thought about what humans did when their children were threatened. "Yes," he said quietly. "Classify it as an act of war." Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. The colony of New Sejong. 23 children. Taken by aliens. The details were sparse, but the impact was immediate. Ambassador Do-Yun Kang was in the middle of a council session when the message reached him. He read it twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then, he stood up, interrupting the speaker, without apology. "This session is over," he announced. "The human delegation is withdrawing immediately. We have an emergency." Council Speaker Velmara looked annoyed. "Ambassador Kang, you cannot simply leave during proceedings. What emergency could possibly?" "Human children have been abducted," Do-Yun said, his voice carrying across the chamber. Every conversation stopped. 23 of them. By a Vrelix merchant vessel. "If you want to prevent a war, I suggest you help us get them back." He walked out before anyone could respond. Behind him, the council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. But Do-Yun didn't care about their reactions. He only cared about one thing: getting those children home. On New Sejong, Minji sat in her empty house, holding Sira's favorite stuffed animal. The small blue rabbit that her daughter never slept without. She clutched it to her chest and made a promise. "I'm coming for you, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's coming. Just hold on." In the cargo bay of the Times Prophet's Edge *. Sarah huddled in a small cage, the bars cold against her back. Hyun was crying in the cage next to hers. She reached through the bars and took his hand. "It's okay," she said, trying to sound brave like Ji-won. "They'll come for us. My mom will come. All our parents will come. Humans always protect their children." She believed it with all her heart. She had to, because the alternative was too terrible to imagine. The cages were small, made of some kind of transparent material that felt cold to touch. Each one held a single child, arranged in rows like products in a warehouse. Dim lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the metal floor. Hyun had stopped crying hours ago. Now he just stared at the wall, his eyes empty. In the next cage, Sarah pressed her face against the bars, trying to see if she could spot Ji-won. The older girl had been placed at the far end of the cargo bay. "Is everyone okay?" Ji-won's voice called out. She sounded strong, even though Sarah could hear the fear underneath. "Sound off if you can hear me." One by one, The children responded. Some voices were shaky. Some were barely whispers. But they all answered. 23 voices in 23 cages. Good, Jiwon said. Listen to me. They're going to try to scare us. But we have to stay together. We have to be brave. Our parents are looking for us right now. I know they are. A door hissed open at the front of the cargo bay. Keeksron entered, his tall form moving on multiple legs. His species looked like a cross between a spider and a lizard, with scales that shimmered in the low light. Feeding time. Specimens, he announced. His voice translated by a device on his chest. He moved down the row, placing bowls of gray paste into each cage through a small slot. When he reached Sierra's cage, she shrank back. He noticed, and made a sound that might have been laughter. Don't worry, little one. You're valuable cargo. We won't damage you. He placed the bowl inside. Eat. You need to stay healthy for the buyer. I want my mom, Sierra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Keeksron tilted his head, studying her with his multiple eyes. Your mother? Ah, yes. Humans do that pair bonding thing. How inefficient. My species lays eggs and moves on. Much simpler. He continued down the line, feeding each child the same gray paste. When he reached Hyun, the boy didn't even look at the food. This one isn't eating, Keeksron said to Bektor, who had followed him in. Is it defective? Young humans need more care than most species. Bektor replied nervously. Perhaps we should. Phil, Weezay, Weezay. They'll eat when they're hungry enough, Keeksron interrupted. I'm not running a nursery. They just need to survive until delivery. After the Vrelics left, Jiwon called out again. Everyone needs to eat. I know it looks disgusting, but we need our strength. Come on. For our families. Slowly, reluctantly, the children began to eat the paste. It tasted like nothing, which was better than tasting bad. Sarah forced herself to swallow, thinking about her mother, thinking about home. Tell me about your families, Jiwon suggested. It'll help pass the time, and it'll remind us why we need to stay strong. The children began to talk, quietly at first, then with more confidence. They talked about their parents, their homes, their pets. They talked about school and friends and the things they missed. The conversations helped push back the fear, at least a little bit. Meanwhile, on the human warship Times, Determination Asterisk, Captain Taeyang stood over the navigation console. His team had been tracking the Times Prophet's edge times for 18 hours straight. The hyperspace trail was growing fainter, but it was still there. How long until we intercept? He asked. At our current speed, 32 hours? The navigator replied. But sir, they're heading into unregulated space. If they jump again before we reach them, they won't, Taeyang said firmly. They think they're safe. They don't know we're coming. His second-in-command, Warden Junho Nam, approached. Captain, the crew is requesting permission to arm themselves. Everyone wants to be part of the boarding team. Taeyang understood. Every person on this ship knew what had been taken. Every person on this ship had a family back home. They all felt the same burning need to act. Tell them to prepare, Taeyang said. When we reach that ship, I want overwhelming force. No chances. No mistakes. We're bringing those children home. Back on New Sejong, Minji had barely slept. She spent her time organizing the other parents, coordinating with the authorities, demanding updates every hour. The waiting was agony, but sitting still was impossible. Ambassador Doyun had sent word from the council. They were treating it as a commercial dispute. A commercial dispute. As if children were merchandise. As if her Sira was just a piece of cargo that had been misplaced. The other parents shared her rage. They gathered at the school, creating a command center of their own. They tracked every piece of news, every rumor, every update from the military. They refused to be passive victims. Dr. Choi. One of the fathers approached her. We're recording statements. From all of us. To broadcast across human space. To show everyone what was taken from us. Minji nodded. When her turn came, she stood in front of the camera and spoke from her heart. My daughter's name is Sira. She's 6 years old. She loves dancing and drawing and making up silly songs. She's afraid of thunder but brave about everything else. She's my whole world. Minji's voice cracked, but she continued. To whoever has her. To whoever allowed this to happen, you've made a terrible mistake. Because we will not stop. We will not rest. We will tear the galaxy apart if we have to. But we will get our children back. The video spread across human space within hours. Millions watched. Millions felt the same anger, the same determination. Military recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Civilian ships offered to join the search. The entire human civilization was mobilizing for 23 children. Other species watched in confusion. Such a response for so few offspring? It seemed excessive, irrational. But humans understood. Every human watching knew that it could have been their child. And every human knew they would do exactly the same thing. In the council chambers, Ambassador Do-yoon stood before the assembly. He had called an emergency session, forcing them to address the situation. The human government demands the immediate return of our citizens, he stated clearly. We also demand the arrest and prosecution of everyone involved in this crime. Council Speaker Velmara looked uncomfortable. Ambassador, we understand your concern. However, the Vrelix Merchant Guild operates under different cultural standards. What you call kidnapping, they may view as legitimate salvage of unattended specimens. The silence that followed was deadly. Unattended specimens. Do-yoon repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you just called our children? I meant no offense, Velmara said quickly. I'm simply explaining that different species have different views on. Let me be very clear. Do-yoon interrupted. Human children are not specimens. They are not cargo. They are not animals to be collected and sold. They are sapient beings under the protection of their families and their government. And if this council cannot understand that basic fact, then humanity will enforce our own justice. Are you threatening military action? Another counselor demanded. I'm stating a fact, Do-yoon replied. We have 72 hours to resolve this peacefully. After that, the human fleet will do whatever is necessary to retrieve our children and punish those responsible. The council can help or get out of the way. Choose wisely. He left the chamber to shocked silence. Behind him, the alien counselors began arguing among themselves. Some called for sanctions against humanity. Others warned that pushing the humans too far could be dangerous. One elderly counselor, Thekson, watched the humans leave with troubled eyes. He had seen many species come and go in his long life. He had seen what happened when you threatened the young of a protective species. It never ended well. On the Times Prophet's Edge asterisk, the children had been caged for almost 2 days. Some had adapted better than others. Ji-won organized games and stories to keep spirits up. She made sure everyone ate and drank water. She became the leader they desperately needed, but she was also just 12 years old. And she was terrified. At night, when the other children finally slept, she allowed herself to cry, silently. She thought about her parents, about whether she would ever see them again. Kixron contacted his buyer to confirm delivery details. The Zelthian noble was delighted with the acquisition. 23 human juveniles? Magnificent. My collection will be the envy of the sector. Payment on delivery, Kixron confirmed. We'll reach the rendezvous point in 30 hours. Excellent. I've prepared special habitats for them. Climate-controlled, properly sized. They'll live comfortably in my menagerie. After the call ended, Vector spoke up. Captain, I've been monitoring broadcasts from human space. There's a military ship tracking us. The Times, determination asterisk. Kixron waved a dismissive hand. One ship? Against the vastness of space? They'll never find us in time. But Vector's concern remained. He had heard stories about humans, about their persistence, about what they did when truly motivated. Looking at the caged children, he wondered if the payment was really worth the risk. In her cage, Sarah held Hyun's hand through the bars. The boy had finally started talking again, whispering stories about his family. "My dad makes the best noodles," he said. "When I get home, I'm going to eat 3 whole bowls." "When we get home," Sarah corrected gently. "Not if." She had to believe it. They all did. The video reached over 2 billion people in the first day. Minji Choi's tearful plea, followed by statements from 22 other parents, spread across every human colony and station. People who had never met these families felt their pain. They saw their own children in those missing faces. Minji watched the view counterclimb, but numbers didn't matter to her. Only one thing mattered: getting Sarah back. She had transformed from a grieving mother into something more focused, more driven. The other parents looked to her for leadership, and she refused to let them down. "We need to make this bigger," she told the group assembled in the school gymnasium. "The council is ignoring us because they think this is just a local problem. We need to show them it's not. We need every human voice demanding action." A mother named Unji raised her hand. "What about the other species? Can we get them to support us?" "I'll try," Minji said. "But first, we need to show our own strength. I want protests at every council embassy. I want letters flooding every representative's office. I want them to understand that humans will not accept this." Within hours, demonstrations began on every major human world. Thousands gathered outside council buildings, holding pictures of the missing children. They chanted. They demanded justice. They refused to leave. The media coverage was constant. News anchors interviewed child psychologists who explained the trauma the children must be experiencing. Military experts discussed rescue options. Politicians debated the proper response. Everyone had an opinion. But everyone agreed on one thing: the children had to come home. Admiral Soo-hyun Baek watched the broadcasts from her flagship. She commanded the entire human defense fleet, and she had never seen her people so unified, so angry, so ready for action. She opened a secure channel to the government leadership. "I'm requesting permission to mobilize the full fleet. All 200 ships." There was a pause. "Admiral, that's our entire military force. Are you certain that's necessary?" "Sir, with respect, I don't think you understand what's happening," Soo-hyun said carefully. "Every person under my command has volunteered for rescue duty. We have civilian ships asking to join us. We have colony defense forces offering support. If we don't act decisively, our people will act on their own. Better to channel that energy than let it run wild." Another pause. Then, "Permission granted. But Admiral, try to avoid starting a war." Soo-hyun smiled grimly. "I'll do my best, sir. But if it comes down to war or abandoning those children, I know which one I'm choosing. If you won, I'm Selv." The mobilization began immediately. Ships from across human space converged on staging points. Crews worked around the clock preparing weapons and supplies. This wasn't just a military operation anymore. It was a statement. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Do-yun delivered humanity's formal ultimatum. The chamber was packed with representatives from over 50 species, all curious about the human response. "The human government demands the following." Do-yun read from a prepared statement. "First, the immediate return of all 23 abducted children. Second, the arrest and extradition of all individuals involved in the kidnapping. Third, formal recognition that the abduction of sapient offspring constitutes a war-level offense under Council law." Council Speaker Velmara looked pained. "Ambassador, these demands are excessive. The Vrelix Merchant Guild has agreed to file an inquiry into the matter. Surely that, MBM, an inquiry?" Do-yun's voice cut like a blade. "You want to form a committee while our children are caged like animals?" Speaker, let me help you understand something about humanity. We are not like you. We do not lay eggs and forget them. We do not have spawning seasons. Our children are precious to us in ways your species, apparently, cannot comprehend. Ambassador, please. Another counselor interrupted. We must maintain diplomatic. Diplomatic what? Doyun demanded. Courtesy? Procedure? Tell me, counselor, how many of your offspring could be stolen before you demanded action? 10? 100? 1,000? Because for humans, the answer is 1. Even 1 is too many. The chamber fell silent. The alien counselors shifted uncomfortably. They were beginning to realize this wasn't going to be resolved with paperwork and delays. An aged counselor named Thek San spoke up. He was a Vorthian, one of the oldest species in the council. Ambassador Kang, perhaps you could explain why humans place such extraordinary value on their young. It might help the council understand your position. Doyun took a breath, choosing his words carefully. In human evolution, our young are born helpless. They cannot walk, cannot feed themselves, cannot survive alone. They require years of constant care. So we evolved to protect them absolutely. Completely. Without question. It's not a choice for us. It's built into our biology, our psychology, our entire culture. When you threaten a human child, you threaten the most fundamental part of what makes us human. He paused, looking around the chamber. And when you threaten our children, we don't calculate odds or consider politics. We act. Every parent, every soldier, every citizen becomes part of the response. Because we know that if we don't protect our children, we don't deserve to exist as a species. The silence that followed was heavier this time. Several counselors exchanged worried glances. They were starting to understand the magnitude of the situation. The human fleet is mobilizing as we speak, Doyun continued. 200 warships. We've also tracked the Vrelix vessel to unregulated space. Our strike team will intercept within hours. This council has one chance to help resolve this peacefully. After that, humans will handle it our way. He left the chamber, knowing he had done all he could through diplomacy. Now it was up to the military. On New Sejong, Minji organized another broadcast. This time, she spoke directly to the alien civilizations watching. I know many of you don't understand our reaction, she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. You think we're overreacting. You think 23 individuals out of billions isn't worth this response. But let me ask you something. Who decides the worth of a life? Who gets to say that my daughter's fear, her suffering, her trauma, doesn't matter because she's just one person? She held up Sira's picture. This is my child. She's 6 years old. She likes to sing songs she makes up. She wants to be a scientist when she grows up. She trusts people. She believes the universe is good. And right now, she's in a cage, wondering why no one is coming to save her. Minji's voice hardened. But someone is coming. Her entire species is coming. We are coming with ships and soldiers, and the absolute certainty that we will get her back. And if that makes us seem irrational or excessive to you, then you don't understand what it means to be human. The broadcast reached beyond human space. Alien citizens watched, many for the first time trying to understand human emotion. Some species began to feel sympathy. Others offered support. A few even started questioning their own treatment of the young. The Vrelix Merchant Guild found itself under unexpected pressure. Several major trading partners began suspending contracts, not wanting to be associated with child abductors. The economic impact was immediate and severe. Matriarch Zilvex, leader of the guild, called an emergency meeting. This is becoming a disaster. One ship, one crew, one transaction, and we're facing potential war with the humans. We could disavow Kixron, one advisor suggested. Claim he acted without authorization. That won't be enough. Another warned. The humans want blood. They want justice. They won't accept just words. Zilvex considered the options. The guild had wealth and influence, but they didn't have a military fleet. If the humans attacked, the guild couldn't defend itself. And the council seemed unwilling or unable to intervene. Contact Kixron, she ordered. Tell him to abort the sail and return the humans immediately. But when they tried to reach the Times Prophet's Edge asterisk, there was no response. The ship had gone dark, approaching the buyer's location in deep space. Chixron was too close to his payday to turn back now. Admiral Suhyun's fleet reached the staging point, a neutral system near the boundary of unregulated space. 200 human warships, bristling with weapons, waiting for the order to advance. She received a communication from Captain Taeyong on the Times Determination asterisk. Admiral, we're 4 hours from intercept. The target is stationary, apparently meeting with another vessel. This is our chance. Do you have visual confirmation of the children? Suhyun asked. Negative, but our scans show 23 small life signs in the cargo bay. It has to be them. Then you have authorization to engage. Rules of engagement are simple. Get our children back, whatever it takes. If the Vrelics resist, you have permission to use all necessary force. Understood, Admiral. We won't let you down. Suhyun closed the channel and looked at her fleet. These were good people, well-trained and professional. But right now, they weren't just soldiers. They were mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, people who understood what was at stake. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet channel. Advance to the border and hold position. If the Times Determination Times needs backup, we go in. All of us. Together. The fleet moved as one. A wall of human steel and determination. Behind them, millions watched and waited. Billions held their breath. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of 23 children, but the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. And in a small house on New Sejong, Minji Choi sat with Sarah's stuffed rabbit, watching the news feeds, praying to every god she could name. Come home, baby, she whispered. Just come home. The Times Determination Times dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Captain Taeyong had predicted. There, hanging in the void, were 2 ships, the Times Prophet's Edge Times, and a luxury yacht bearing Zelthian markings. They were docked together, likely conducting the transfer of goods, of children, battle stations. Taeyong ordered quietly. Weapons hot. Boarding teams ready. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, but he could feel the tension. This wasn't a routine mission. Every person on this ship knew what was in that cargo bay. Every person wanted revenge. Hail them, Taeyong commanded. The communication officer sent the signal. For a long moment, there was no response. Then Kixron's face appeared on the screen, his multiple eyes blinking in surprise. Human vessel. You have no authority in unregulated space. Leave immediately, or you have 30 seconds to power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, Taeyong interrupted. If you do not comply, I will disable your ship by force. This is your only warning. Cheeksron's scales flushed with anger. This is piracy. The council will hear about this. 20 seconds. The Vrelics captain looked at something off-screen, probably consulting with his crew. Taeyong could almost see him calculating odds, weighing options. Greed fought against survival instinct. Greed lost. We're not surrendering our cargo, Cheeksron declared. You'll have to. Taeyong cut the transmission. Fire. The Times Determination Times was a military vessel, designed for combat. The Times, Prophet's Edge Times, was a merchant ship, with light, defensive shields. The first salvo of precise shots took out the merchant ship's engines. The second disabled its weapons. The third targeted the docking clamps connecting it to the Zelthian yacht. The luxury yacht immediately disengaged and jumped to hyperspace, its wealthy owner abandoning the transaction without hesitation. Coward. Boarding pods away. Warden Junho reported. 6 pods launched from the Times Determination **, magnetic clamps locking onto the Times Prophet's Edge Times hull. Marines in full combat gear breached the merchant ship at multiple points, moving with deadly efficiency. Taeyong watched through their helmet cameras as they swept through the corridors. 2 Vrelix crew members tried to resist and were stunned unconscious. The others surrendered immediately when they saw the humans' weapons. Cargo bay located. 1 squad leader reported. Breaching. Now. 2. The doors exploded inward. Marines flooded in, weapons raised. Then they stopped. Even through the camera feeds, Taeyang could see them freeze. The cages filled the entire bay. 23 of them. And inside each one, a small, human child. Some were sleeping. Others looked up with huge, frightened eyes. One little girl started crying. An older girl in the back tried to comfort her through the bars. "Oh God!" Someone whispered over the open channel. "They put them in cages, like animals." For a moment, no one moved. The trained soldiers, hardened warriors who had seen combat, were frozen by the sight. These were children, human children, locked in cages, barely big enough to sit up in. Warden Junho's voice came through, tight with barely controlled rage. "Open them. Open every cage. Get these kids out. Now." The Marines moved into action, using cutting tools to break the locks. The transparent walls fell away. Children scrambled out, some running to the Marines, others hesitating, unsure if this was another trick. "It's okay," one Marine said, kneeling down to a small boy's level. "We're humans. We're here to take you home. You're safe now." The boy, it was, Hyun Kim, stared at the Marine's face, at the flag patch on his shoulder, at the weapon strapped to his back. Then he started crying and threw himself into the Marine's arms. All across the cargo bay, children were being lifted out of their prisons. The Marines held them gently, these hardened soldiers cradling scared kids like they were made of glass. Some of the Marines were crying too, though they tried to hide it. Jiwon was the last one out. She walked to Warden Junho, standing as tall as her 12-year-old frame could manage. 23 present, she reported, her voice shaking but clear. "Everyone's alive. Sierra has a fever." Hyun stopped talking for a while, but he's better now. "We all stuck together like you teach us in school." Junho crouched down to her eye level. "You did good, kid. You did real good. Your parents are going to be so proud." "Can we go home now?" Jiwon asked. And suddenly she wasn't trying to be brave anymore. She was just a scared child who wanted her family. "Yeah," Junho said softly. "We're going home." The medical team arrived, checking each child carefully. Most were dehydrated and malnourished, but alive. No serious injuries. Considering what could have happened, it was almost miraculous. Sarah asked the medic, checking her. "Is my mom okay? Does she know we're coming?" "Your mom is fine," the medic assured her. "And yes, she knows. The whole colony knows. Everyone's waiting for you." On the bridge, Taeyong watched the rescue unfold with profound relief. They had made it in time. The children were safe. He sent the message that millions were waiting for. Children recovered. All alive. Returning home. But there was still the matter of justice. "Where is the Vrelix captain?" he asked. "Detention, sir. Locked down with his entire crew. I want him brought to the bridge. Now." Minutes later, Kixron was escorted in by armed guards. He tried to maintain his arrogance, but fear flickered in his eyes. He was starting to understand the magnitude of his mistake. "This is illegal detainment," he protested. "I am a licensed merchant, operating in—" "You kidnapped children," Taeyang said, his voice colder than the void outside. "Human children. Do you have any idea what you've done? They were just specimens, unclaimed juveniles. This is standard practice in the exotic trade." Taeyang stood, walking slowly toward the Vrelix. "Let me explain something to you. Those weren't specimens. Each one had a name, a family, a future. That little girl you caged? Her name is Sarah. She wants to be a scientist. The boy who stopped talking? His name is Hyun. He loves to draw. He stopped directly in front of Chixron. You didn't steal cargo. You stole our children, and now your entire species is going to learn why that was the worst mistake anyone could make. Chixron's scales had gone pale. But the council allows the exotic trade. I followed the regulations. Seeing this Kaler. Not anymore, Taeyang said. Because of what you did, because of the fear you caused, humans are going to make sure this never happens again. To anyone. Ever. Back in human space, news of the rescue spread even faster than the abduction had. People celebrated in the streets. Parents who had been holding their own children tighter finally relaxed. The children were coming home. But the anger didn't fade. If anything, it intensified. Now that the immediate crisis was over, people wanted accountability. They wanted justice. They wanted to make sure this never happened again. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Doyun called another session. This time, he had more leverage. The children have been recovered by human military forces, he announced. The abductors are in custody. Now we discuss consequences. Council Speaker Velmara looked relieved. This is wonderful news, Ambassador. I'm sure we can arrange for the proper legal proceedings too. No, Doyun interrupted. You don't understand. This isn't over. The Vrelics will answer to human justice, and this council will pass new laws to prevent this from ever happening again. Ambassador, you cannot dictate council law, another member protested. Can't I? Doyun looked around the chamber. Right now, the entire human fleet is mobilized. 200 warships. Every human colony is demanding action. If this council cannot provide justice, humans will provide it ourselves. Do you really want to test whether we're bluffing? The silence was deafening. Through the windows of the council chamber, they could see human news broadcasts playing on screens across the station. Images of children being carried out of cages. Interviews with parents who had thought they'd never see their kids again. The emotional impact was overwhelming. The Vrelics Merchant Guild has already agreed to cooperate, Velmara said carefully. They're willing to issue an apology and pay reparations. That's a start, Doyun replied. But it's not enough. We want 3 things. First, Xixron and his crew stand trial under human law for kidnapping and slavery. Second, the Galactic Council officially recognizes that the abduction of sapient offspring is a war-level offense. Third, new laws protecting children of all species from exploitation. These are significant demands, Thexan spoke up. The old Vorthian looked tired. But perhaps necessary. I have seen what happens when species threaten each other's young. It never ends peacefully. The humans have shown remarkable restraint so far. We would be wise to work with them, rather than against them. Other counselors began nodding. Some, reluctantly, others with genuine agreement. The human response had shocked them all. Made them reconsider assumptions about this young species. I moved to establish a committee to draft the proposed legislation, Thexan continued, and to expedite the legal proceedings against the accused. The motion passed. Not unanimously, but with enough support. It was a victory, though a bittersweet one. On the Times, determination asterisk. The children were fed proper food, for the first time in days. They were given clean clothes. They were allowed to call home, talking to tearful parents across light years of space. They were beginning to understand that the nightmare was truly over. Sarah sat wrapped in a blanket, talking to her mother via video call. On the screen, Minji was crying and smiling at the same time. That's right, baby. Always. Nothing in the universe could stop us from finding you. As the Times Determination Times began its journey home, Captain Taeyang stood on the bridge, watching the stars. They had won. The children were safe. Justice would be served. But he knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity today. Something they would never forget. You could negotiate with humans. You could trade with them. You could even fight them. But you never, ever touched their children. The Times Determination Times approached New Sejong 3 days after the rescue. Every ship in orbit formed an honor guard, their running lights creating a path home. On the surface, the entire colony had gathered at the spaceport. 50,000 people waiting for 23 children. Minji stood at the front of the crowd, gripping Sarah's stuffed rabbit so tightly her knuckles were white. Around her were the other parents, all of them barely holding themselves together. The waiting had been agony, even knowing their children were safe and coming home. The transport shuttle descended slowly, gently, as if carrying the most precious cargo in the universe. Which, to the humans watching, it was. The doors opened. Medical personnel exited first, then the Marines who had rescued them. And finally, the children. Sarah appeared in the doorway, saw her mother, and ran. She didn't make it 3 steps before Minji swept her up. Holding her so tightly, the little girl squeaked. All around them, similar reunions played out. Parents clutching their children, tears of joy and relief, apologies whispered for things that weren't anyone's fault. Hyun's father held his son and sobbed openly. Jiwon's mother kissed her forehead over and over, as if making sure she was really real. Every family had their moment, their private miracle. The colony physician checked each child thoroughly. Most were suffering from malnutrition and dehydration, easily treated. Some had psychological trauma that would require more time. But they were all alive, all home, all safe. That night, Sarah wouldn't let go of her mother's hand, even when sleeping. Minji lay beside her daughter's bed, watching her breathe, barely able to believe she was really back. Every few minutes, she would reach out and touch Sarah's hair, just to make sure. The next day, the media arrived. They wanted interviews, wanted to tell the story. At first, Minji refused. The children had been through enough, but Jiwon asked to speak, and several other parents agreed their children could participate if they wanted to. The interviews were broadcast across the galaxy. Jiwon, sitting in her living room with her parents nearby, told her story calmly but clearly. "They treated us like animals," she said. "They put us in cages and gave us paste to eat. They talked about us like we weren't people, like we couldn't understand them." She paused. "But we stuck together. All 23 of us. Because that's what humans do. We protect each other. Especially kids." The reporter asked gently, "Were you scared?" "Yes," Jiwon admitted. "Really scared. But I was also angry. And I knew someone would come for us. My parents, the military, somebody. Because that's what being human means. We don't leave people behind." The interview became the most watched broadcast in human history. But more importantly, it was seen across the galaxy. Other species watched a 12-year-old girl describe her captivity with such dignity and strength. They began to understand why humans had reacted so intensely. At the Galactic Council, the emergency session had stretched into its 3rd day. The proposed legislation, officially titled the Sapient Offspring Protection Mandate, but already nicknamed the Human Child Law, was being debated intensely. This law would criminalize practices that have existed for thousands of years, one counselor argued. The economic impact alone. The economic impact of losing your young to kidnappers? Ambassador Doyun countered. Tell me, which of your traditions is worth traumatizing children? Which profit margin justifies putting a 6-year-old in a cage? The debate continued, but the outcome was becoming clear. Public opinion, even among alien species, was shifting. The images of those children in cages had struck a chord. Many species who didn't value their own young still found the treatment cruel and unnecessary. Elder Thexan finally stood to speak. At over 800 years old, his words carried weight. "I have watched civilizations rise and fall," he said slowly. "I have seen species make many mistakes, but I have never seen a species threaten another's young and survive the consequences. The Crithians did it once, to the Mordesh. Within 10 years, the Crithians were extinct. The Mordesh hunted every last one of them down." He paused, letting that sink in. "The humans have shown remarkable restraint. They could have started a war. They could have destroyed the Vrelics entirely. Instead, they came to us seeking justice through law. We should be grateful for their patience, and we should give them the justice they deserve." The vote was called. The Sapient Offspring Protection Mandate passed with 80% approval. Any being who abducted, harmed, or exploited the young of sapient species would face severe criminal penalties. The exotic trade in sentient offspring was banned entirely. It was a victory. But for Ambassador Doyun, it was just the beginning. Laws were only as good as their enforcement. The trial of Kixron and his crew took place on New Sejong, in a specially constructed courtroom. The Galactic Council sent observers. The media covered every moment. The galaxy watched as humans demonstrated their justice system. Kixron tried to defend himself. "I was operating under accepted practices. The regulations were unclear. I meant no harm." "You caged children," the prosecutor said simply. "You stole them from their families. You planned to sell them to a collector who would have kept them as pets. What part of that is unclear?" Rees. The evidence was overwhelming. Ship logs, communication records. The cages themselves. The defense had nothing to work with. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment on a human penal colony. Kixron would spend the rest of his days behind bars, just as he had imprisoned the children. His crew received lesser sentences, but all would serve time. The Vrelics Merchant Guild issued a formal apology and paid enormous reparations, enough to fund education and trauma counseling for every child on New Sejong. They also implemented new internal regulations, though everyone knew it was damage control. Matriarch Zilvex personally traveled to New Sejong to deliver the apology. She met with the parents in a closed session, without media present. "I cannot undo what was done," she said, her translator rendering her words into human speech. "I cannot take away the fear or the trauma, but I want you to know that my species has learned from this. We will never make this mistake again." Minji listened, her arms crossed. "Will you teach your children about what happened? Will you make sure future generations know why this was wrong?" Zilvex hesitated. "Our species does not nurture our young the way yours does. But yes, this incident will be part of our history. A reminder of consequences." Virian sided. Virian sided. Virian sided. Virian sided. Our peace. It wasn't perfect forgiveness. But it was something. 5 years passed. The galaxy had changed in small but significant ways. The exotic trade was heavily regulated now. Species that had never considered the welfare of any young, not just their own, began implementing protections. The human child law became a model for other legislation. On New Sejong, life had returned to something resembling normal. The children were growing up, though none of them forgot what had happened. Sarah Choi, now 11 years old, stood in front of her class presenting a project on interspecies diplomacy. She had overcome most of her trauma, though she still slept with her stuffed rabbit and didn't like small spaces. "The most important thing about different species," she explained, "is understanding that we all value different things. But some things should be universal, like protecting kids, all kids, everywhere." Her teacher smiled proudly. Sierra had decided she wanted to become a diplomat, to help species understand each other better. To prevent future misunderstandings, that could lead to tragedy. Hyun had started talking again after several months of therapy. He was drawing constantly, creating pictures of the rescue, of Marines opening cages, of being reunited with his family. Art was his way of processing what had happened. His parents encouraged it, understanding that healing took different forms for different people. Jiwon had joined the military academy, as planned. At 17, she was already showing exceptional leadership skills. Her instructors noted that she had an unusual ability to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly in crisis situations. They didn't know it came from organizing scared children in cages, and she never told them. Captain Taeyang had been promoted to admiral, taking over the defense of the new Sejong sector. His strike team received the highest commendations human military could award, but what he valued most was the thank you notes from the children's parents, which he kept in his quarters. Admiral Soo Hyun Baek had become something of a legend. The image of her fleet, 200 ships strong, demanding justice for children, became iconic. She had retired from active service but now taught at the military academy, training the next generation of officers. Her most important lesson: sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not for territory or resources, but for what's right. Quote, Dr. Minji Choi had transformed her personal tragedy into purpose. She founded an organization dedicated to protecting children across all human colonies. She lobbied for better safety measures, stronger laws, more support for families. She turned her fury and fear into constructive action, ensuring no other parent would experience what she had. Ambassador Doyoon remained at the council, now with significantly more respect from the other members. The human delegation had grown larger and more influential. When Doyoon spoke, people listened, because they had learned that humans, when properly motivated, were a force to be reckoned with. In the council chambers, a memorial had been installed. 23 small handprints, cast in crystallized resin, mounted on the wall near the main entrance. Below them, an inscription in multiple languages. These represent the children of New Sejong, whose abduction taught the galaxy a lesson we should never forget. Children are not cargo. They are not specimens. They are the future of their species, deserving of protection and respect. This memorial stands as a reminder: harm the young of any species, and face the consequences. Tourists and diplomats alike stopped to read it, to place their hands over the prints, to remember. The Zelthian noble who had tried to buy the children had his entire collection confiscated. Other collectors faced similar consequences. The exotic trade didn't disappear entirely, but it became far more regulated, far more careful about the sapience of its subjects. One evening, Minji sat with Sarah on their porch, watching the sunset. Sarah was doing homework, working on an essay about her future goals. Mom, Sarah asked, do you think what happened to us changed anything? Like, really changed things? Minji considered the question carefully. Yes, she said finally. I think it showed the galaxy something they didn't understand before. That humans aren't just another species. That we have our own values. Our own lines that cannot be crossed. And that we'll enforce those lines, if we have to. Was it worth it? Sira asked quietly. All the fear and the bad stuff. Was the change worth it? Writing. Was the change worth it? Minji pulled her daughter close. Nothing is worth what you went through. Nothing. But since it happened, at least something good came from it. Other kids are safer now. Other families won't go through what we did. That doesn't make it okay. But it makes it mean something. Sira nodded, understanding in her own way. She returned to her homework, writing about wanting to be a diplomat, to help species understand each other better. Above them, in orbit, the defense platforms continued their watch. On Earth and across human space, parents tucked their children into bed, never taking for granted the safety and security they had. And throughout the galaxy, the lesson had been learned and remembered. You could trade with humans, You could negotiate with them. You could even compete with them, but you never, ever threatened their children, because humanity had proven, beyond any doubt, that they would burn down the galaxy itself before they abandoned a single child to darkness. That was the consequence. That was the price of understanding humanity, and the universe would never forget it.